There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is your mountain.
Welcome, everybody, to a first for the Your Mountain podcast. It's our first live broadcast of the Your Mountain podcast. I think maybe we've had another live broadcast.
I don't know that we have.
I don't know if we have. We've recorded on site at different events, but you're going to hear you're going to hear a lot of background noise in this one because we're recording live. We're going to have people jump in on us. We're hoping we can catch the governor later. We're hoping we can catch the director of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department later. Governor of Wyoming, that is.
I do have to set the table for this podcast.
Yeah.
Mike and I, in order to make sure this podcast worked, at the time of day that we did it, Mike and I met in the parking lot and discussed, and I went and made sure that I was a little concerned about dressing down too much by I'm wearing a camouflage shirt and a sport coat, and I was like, but it's a button-up shirt, right, Mike?
Absolutely.
It's
a
in
beautiful
Cryptek.
looking Cryptek.
Yeah, because that's the best camouflage ever invented by man. But as we go forward, so Mike's feeling a little too dressed up because he's getting off of his day job, and he's in a suit that costs way too much money. But he decides, hey, I'm going to run home and put some jeans on.
That's right. I had to run home to dress down.
Yep, and then a guy shows up. I mean, I swear I thought it was a homeless guy at first because a dude rolls in wearing a thermal top with a black T-shirt over and a pair of running shoes to a meeting that's going to be attended by the governor. I'm like, who in the... Oh, it's Dave.
That's right. That's right. I'm just representing. Thank you, Mr. John Zinnel.
Yes. Federal premium. Thank you very much for the T-shirts. Maybe next time send them after the legislative session.
How about one with a collar?
Yeah, that's what you just send it. Anyway,
look, we're at a sportsman's reception. I get it that the governor's here and the director of Game and Fish and
Jess,
number of Game and Fish commissioners and legislators and
how many people that hunt more than Dave are rolling around here with a button-up shirt on?
Well, you got to introduce Jess first before you just say her first name.
That is a good.
She's been on the podcast.
She
before,
has.
But
Jess Johnson with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation is joining us, and I would say the reason we're at this event and that we have this background noise.
That's right.
You are the motor behind this machine.
Well, I have a lot of things to say. First of all, it's called classy camo when you wear camo under a sport coat.
Thank you very much.
Second of all, jeans is totally formal wear in the sportsman's repertoire.
Yeah.
I'm wearing jeans. I'm
Third of all,
formal. I am formal.
I am not allowed to wear jeans in my office.
I don't know what we classify the thermal and the T-shirt in, but we'll call it camouflage of a different kind.
Hobo chic.
It's hobo chic. That's better than hefty. I'll take hobo chic.
That Dave showed up earlier today, and the one stipulation on him giving a little bit of a lesson to our Camo at the Capitol class, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is that do I have to dress up? That was the only question I got.
He wasn't wearing this at the Capitol, was he?
No, I think he had a sweater
I was wearing
over
a sweater.
this, but I think this is what was under it.
So
there was a sweater over
Actually,
it.
no. So I'll tell you exactly what was under it.
Before that, tell me, Bill Cosby, when was that sweater made? When did you buy that sweater? Or when did someone buy you that sweater?
Are you making fun of it? Because we went out to dinner the other night, and everybody at dinner, we were at a friend's birthday party, and everybody at the table, to a person, said, how old is that sweater?
Because you're known for it.
And it was 20 years old.
No,
it wasn't. I take that back. It was 17 years old.
It can't be that
young.
It was. It can't be that young.
I bought it in 2002.
Was this
so it's almost 18.
It
was Banana Republic.
From a guy.
First of all, you've never bought anything.
He bought it 17 years ago at a yard sale.
I bought it on a clearance rack at Banana Republic in Spokane, Washington.
I know this. That's much better than a yard sale.
I know this. I buy so little clothing that I can tell you the exact place and price that I bought every piece of clothing dating back 20 plus years. That's a pretty big accomplishment in itself.
I gotta say,
is it?
But I can tell you that. So the shirt I was wearing underneath that tie.
What are you guys doing?
Senator,
What's going on with that microphone?
we don't even know.
Damn.
Senator Kale Case, ladies and gentlemen, photo bombing our podcast.
Yeah.
anyway, the shirt I was wearing underneath my sweater today was actually not this lovely shirt, which I'll get to later, but it was a Magpul shirt.
Oh, I love it.
What?
Approve.
Which Nephi I think you gave me.
I believe you. That sounds accurate.
I think the thing is send shirts, maybe button up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the hat that I've got today, representing, right? It was free too. But maybe we should get to talking about what we can talk about.
Yeah,
So
why are we here?
why are we here? Jess, why are we here?
Everyone's looking at me. Okay, so we are here at the Camo at the Capitol, and this is a legislative training, a citizen lobbyist training, and a sportsman's legislative reception, which sounds like there's a lot of nuance and wonky words in that. But basically what it is bringing the hunters and anglers from around the state of Wyoming into their capital, introducing them to their decision makers, and helping them learn the tools to be an effective advocate for what they believe in, what they care about, and what is important for all of us.
So, first of all, why is that important? Why do you think this program is so important? And then we'll talk about the history of it in a little more detail.
I thought the key to being a good advocate was just showing up with a large cup full of anger.
I think that was maybe what was historically what folks thought was what being an advocate was. But a couple years ago, I spent my first session down at the Wyoming State Legislature, and I saw very quickly out of the gate that the hunting and angling voice was missing or misguided in a lot of their communications, and it wasn't in a bad way. Like they're passionate.
Actually,
it wasn't a bad way.
In some ways, it wasn't a bad way. We can all vouch for that on this side of the table.
True. It wasn't a bad way, but it was from a good place.
Sure.
But it was misguided. There
was passion, but misapplication of that passion.
Exactly. And coming down here, I think the first time I was down at the Wyoming State Legislature, Senator Case, does he want to come on? The first time I was down at the Wyoming State Legislature, it was an eye-opening moment. And for those of you that are listening that haven't seen your state legislatures, I highly recommend you spend even just a day there. There weren't a ton of folks that saw through my eyes or through the same kind of lenses that I was looking at that were down here. The ones that were again like well-intentioned but misguided, and the voice wasn't resonating. It was angry because we're quote unquote unheard. It was misguided in the sense of like we were talking about headlines that we'd seen, not facts that we had researched. It was landing on deaf ears, because when you walk up to someone and you say, I believe this, you have to believe like I do, and you say it aggressively, no one listens.
Yeah, when you throw a hot cup of anger on people, they don't like that.
I've always used this thing of like, if you want someone, say you walk up to someone and you just hate the color of their shirt, or you hate what's on their shirt.
You do not hate. You're looking at me when you say that. I'm like, you do not hate what's on my shirt. You love what is on my shirt.
I love it. I'm using this as we'll make this an example. But if you hate the color or what's on their shirt, it's offending. It's something you don't like, and you go up to them and you smack them across the face and you say, I hate your shirt. What is the likelihood that human is going to go home and change their shirt?
It's zero.
Maybe,
zero.
Or maybe pretty good. No, but you're right. It's
like
they'll
someone,
dig in.
They'll dig in, or even if they do change it, they'll change it with something that it's called bridge burning, and they will never speak to you again, and they will build a defense against you for the rest of their lives.
Yeah,
you will be the enemy. You will be that person that was aggressive towards them, as opposed to going up and being like, you seem like someone that seems like a good person. Let's sit down and talk. Let's build a relationship. Let's talk about things that we find in common. And maybe in some of that, I'll suggest to you that the shirt you're wearing is not the perfect shirt for you, and you'll look better in something else.
You know,
who will listen to you in that? Almost everyone. When we build that relationship, when you build the trust, when you are respectful, and you look at the person who believes differently from you, and you look them in the eyes and you look at them as a human, we can build those bridges, and they may not change their shirt, but you're at least going to be able to build a conversation, and later, when they go shopping for the next shirt, they're going to talk to you.
First of all, you deserve a ton of credit for teaching people to be effective advocates, because it's so important, and there's so much opportunity if you can do the advocacy in the right way. And then I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what you said, and the example I always like to use for when people talk to each other is, we're all sitting at a table here, and often when we have problems as human beings, we like to set the problem in the table in between us all, and then we punch each other over the problem, we blame each other, and we get mad at each other. When in reality, if we could just all sit on the same side of the table, and then we put the problem out on the table in front of us, and we all work on it from the same side of the table and say, hey, we're going to take this problem. Suddenly, we can get someplace with it. And it's just so much more effective rather than arguing over the problem, getting on the same side of the table and saying, hey, let's work on the problem together.
Carrying on your analogy, sometimes it just takes sitting on the same side of the table and everybody take their turn describing what they see the problem is.
Yeah.
What is it that it's sitting on that table? How does it look to you? How does it look to the person next to you? And then finding those commonalities to identify how to address the problem.
Well, those same people around building further on that, those same people around the table, while you're telling me your view of that problem, everybody else around the table has to be leaning in and listening.
Listening, absolutely.
Right? Absolutely listening.
Yeah. A lot happens listening.
I think we're going to be adding another
we
person
are.
here.
I think so, too.
Speaking of looking at the table and different problems.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to Commissioner Ralph Brokaw from the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission. Let's check your levels really quick,
welcome.
Ralph.
Well, this is Ralph, and here I am.
Ralph
Let's pull that microphone just in a little closer.
He speaks softly.
I'll pull it in. I do.
There it
he
is.
speaks softly, but he carries your tags in his pocket.
He carries a boomstick.
Yeah.
Maybe so. Well,
So-
I can hear myself now, so welcome.
Oh, let me introduce you a little bit. So,
You bet.
Ralph Brokaw, how long have you been on the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission?
I'm just a year.
Just a year.
Just a year, yep.
How long have we known each other?
Oh, Nephi, I hired you a long time ago.
I think it's story time.
Yeah, I was president of the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. We were hiring a watershed coordinator, doing applicants in Casper, Wyoming, and here came this kid named Nephi Cole, and he was in a gray suit, and he looked sharp as a tack, and yeah, I ultimately hired that young man, and look at how Nephi's grown and what he's done with his life. He's done great.
I had the opportunity working with NRCS to work with the conservation districts on statewide water quality work to address impaired streams, and you led that effort as you were the president of the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts.
You bet.
At a time when you guys were, and in leadership for so long, that organization, at a time when you guys were leading the nation in addressing impaired streams through collaborative work, through community conservation, where you put everybody in the watershed, the landowners and the recreationists and the municipalities all at the same table together and put together plans.
Yep.
We were just talking about dealing with issues and how sometimes people get on the opposite side of a table and they argue over issues. You guys were the leaders in putting everybody on the same side of the table and identifying challenges and addressing those challenges for water quality, for the betterment of the entire system, the entire landscape, everything that was going on. So you guys did a great work there.
Yep, it was a good time, and certainly the executive director, Bobby Frank, she certainly did
she's a rock star.
A huge amount of work before that, and the previous president. The luxury I had was the legislation was in place, and the players were all pointed in the same direction. I just had to coordinate people, and Nephi was easy, and some other people, and it just worked out really well. It worked out great for Wyoming for water quality work. We brought science to the table. We brought science to the decisions that developed clean water. When you talk about that networking, I just met this guy. You're going to have
Shiva.
to help me. Shiva.
Yeah.
I just met Shiva. And he wants to sit down with me as a commissioner. He wants to talk about large predators, their impact on wildlife, and the commission's position and direction the state's taken. And I said, you know what, Shiva, we're headed the same direction. We might be on two different roads, but we're headed the same direction. We all care about the same thing. So communication and getting the players at the table, I think that's key, Nephi.
So one of the most impactful things I think I ever heard was something that you said when you're talking about these issues with landowners and issues with conservation and issues with wildlife. And I'm going to take you back to the room and you're going to know what I'm talking about. And I think that maybe you're going to. I'd appreciate it if you try and say the same thing you said. Like, you had Game and Fish came out to a meeting, and they were talking about water, and they were talking about ranches and water. And you said something that you said, don't make, do you remember this quote?
I don't.
Okay. You said it, and I'll let you kind of fill in and tell me why you feel this way. There were people that were talking about the need to leave water in the stream for fish.
Right.
And what you said is, like, you said, you know what, I love fish. And my neighbor, he loves fish too. And you know what we're going to do? I'll leave some of my water in that stream for the fish, and he'll leave his water in the stream for that fish. And we'll all do something so that we can have fish in our streams because we care about them. But please don't make me choose between my life, my ranch, and the fish.
Right. Yep, you bet. It's ironic you bring that up now, Nephi, because now working for the Game and Fish Department, and we're working this bill about in-stream flow, which originally, it was the boogeyman in the closet to agriculture. But the more I've learned about it, the more I've come to respect it, and now I see what they're doing. I think the current file that they're working on right now got amended appropriately. I give kudos to Jess and her group, the way they've been working that, talking with Deputy Director Angie Bruce. They say that you guys have just done a yeoman's amount of work this last week, getting the legislators educated on the issue. And really what they've done to that legislation is what we did, I don't know how many years ago, but we put science in front of the emotion, and we put that model of the Game and Fish is proud to be in the public's eye. We're proud to work with landowners. We are transparent. We are open to all stakeholders. And that particular Senate file on that in-stream flow legislation that was introduced included a public comment period, which was critical. The Game and Fish we're all in on that, but it left out the scientific component until Wyoming Water Development made their decision. And so Director Bruce and I were talking, and I said, Angie, this is just an emotional response. And the commission, while we encourage their participation, it should be at the end of the process with the state engineer's office. We need the science first. We need the water study, the hydrology study. We need to see the impact of downstream water users, those adjudicated senior rights. All that needs to be taken into consideration before that in-stream flow is considered. And I hope that's the way it's going. I know Jess is working on that.
As it's, as we're sitting here on February 25th, it's passed through the Senate with the amendment on it that made this bill okay for us.
Good.
And I will say, and I'll put it out there, is Liz Rose with Trout Unlimited did the lion's share of the work here. Wyoming Wildlife Federation and many other groups backed her up, but she did the lion's share of the work, and we're very, very excited. She's new on with TU, and we were happy to support that. We've worked together. A lot of this is finding that coalition that agrees on things and works for the same thing, but that the in-stream flow bill, which is what we're calling it now, it's Senate File 75 for the 2020 Wyoming State Legislative Session, is now in a place where we can support it, and we'll work to keep it there. But prior to that removing the decision from the Wyoming or the Water Development Commission and putting it back in the state engineer's office was the right way to go. Liz wrote the amendment. Senator Cale Case, who I think you heard walking by earlier today, is a man that carried it.
Fantastic.
And it stuck on the Senate floor, and we were very excited for that.
So if I may, how do you expand on that? So I mean, we talked a little about fish and water, but how does that same viewpoint that you have, how does that translate to big game and landowners? How does it to wildlife in general and landowners? I mean, what's the message, a take-home message you want to share with our listeners about, that collaborative effort and how you do it?
Well, what I would say as a landowner, and I'll speak personally for me, you certainly go into agriculture and continue the family tradition, not for the money. You do it for. I heard a quote tonight. You do it for something you can't put a price on, the invaluable component of life. And we ranch our family ranch, and for all those things you can't put a value on, and we appreciate the elk, antelope, deer, lions, bears, fish, all those wildlife species. We have a complex down a stream beaver pond complex, hundreds of birds, bird diversity that come through there. And so wildlife is a huge component to a way of life that we enjoy, that we love sharing with people. And I don't know how else to quantify it, but it's part of the full picture. And when you take that out of the picture, your quality of life really isn't fulfilling. It isn't worth it. If I want to make money, I can go drive a dozer and I can make a lot of money. But I can't see the things that I see. And so the wildlife component on our ranch is just as valuable as the cows. We use the cows as a tool to try and enhance the environment, to try and improve that environment. We notice an increase in the diversity in species. My dad lived there his whole life, and I'm not saying their management was bad. I'm just saying wildlife has increased and changed over time. He lived there his whole life. He never saw a mountain lion. I see 1 or 2 a year. We've had 3 legal kills within 2 miles of my house this year. Some people argue that's a bad thing because the mule deer population is low. Well, maybe so. There's a lot of critters out there that want to eat a mule deer. I'm not going to say it's the lions, but I've got to enjoy that. I've got to enjoy huge herds of mule deer, huge herds of elk. And now I see lions, and I see bears, and I see fish. And just that whole wildlife component is spectacular.
It seems like a common value of Wyoming, and I think that's something where we can always come back to. No matter which way the pendulum swings, people care about wildlife in this state.
I agree 100%, and certainly from our family, we've always valued it, but now that I sit on the commission and I get the email, Wyoming's very passionate about their wildlife, and we can look at something that's simple that not a lot of people are interested in. Black bear season settings, we did a commission meeting ago. I probably had 40, 50 emails, phone calls. Those that are into bear hunting are very into it, and now the public speaking up about in March we're going to have our season settings. We're going to open up those chapters for mule deer, antelope, elk, moose, all those quotas. And I'm telling you what, Wyoming is passionate about our wildlife. They love it. They're okay to share it. They're receptive to sharing it as long as
Dave.
they get.
Dave won't share it.
As long
I do
as they
share it.
As
We
long
keep
as
our
they get the
places a little
chance.
secret.
Here's my secret about it. I'm more than happy to share our wildlife, and we get really protective in the state, and we talk about not wanting non-residents. I want non-residents because they subsidize my experience and keep my license prices low.
Dave, I agree 100%. This is Ralph the Rancher talking. I love sharing with them. I just don't want it to become that only the nobility can enjoy what we enjoy every day.
Absolutely.
We take it for granted. And I've got a lot of friends that are non-residents trying to come hunt the state. And, man, it's tough to get them in, but
it's getting harder
it's
and harder.
It's a good state to be a resident in.
It really is a good state to be a
as
resident
someone that
of.
hunts the general tag more times than not, it's an incredible state to be a resident, and the access and the ability and the space that we have to go. It's a great state to be a resident in. Well, on that note, Wyoming sucks and don't come.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the passion that Wyoming has for the wildlife, and actually, just a few months ago, the University of Wyoming and Duke University did a survey within the state, a poll in the state to kind of find that out. It was in the context of supporting crossings for wildlife, which I know you're very active in with the commission. This study came back, and it was somewhere around 90% of the public of Wyoming view wildlife as an important reason for why they live here. Mm-hmm. I mean, that not just that they like wildlife, but that it's an important component of their life. You bet. Here.
I came back and I stayed because of it.
Yeah, I moved here because of it.
That was.
You think about it. I came here.
I never left because of it.
As an adult, I moved here to go to the University of Wyoming and to fish, and not in that order.
Right.
Well,
flipped.
Thank you for taking a little bit of time with this. I honestly. Can
I ask one question?
Yeah.
Because I know you're about to kick him off.
Well, no, I'm not going to kick him off.
I want to ask one question because of why we're here and we're talking about this, and we were just talking about Jess about the Camo at the Capitol that she's doing and the reception that she's having here.
Yep.
And as a game and fish commissioner, and just to be clear, I think it's important to say, so the Game and Fish Commission provides policy direction to the Game and Fish Department.
Correct.
From an oversight and policy direction, budget management, all of that sort of
Correct.
thing. Just to be clear what your role is. But the question that I have is really, because everybody's here, all these sportsmen from all over the state coming together to celebrate Wyoming's wildlife, and I want to know from, as a commissioner, what do you find to be the most effective advocacy by sportsmen? Like what's the best way for a sportsman to communicate with you as a commissioner to have a productive dialogue about wildlife policy in the state?
Sure. Well, there's several opportunities for the public to participate, and we do a lot of public meetings through our region offices, and they're always welcome to contact the commissioners at any time. But really, the public's input is encouraged strongly at public meetings, and if you want your voice heard, take time to stop in at your local Game and Fish office and get on their list. If not, we advertise everywhere, and when you see that, take time to become involved. And those people that take that time and get involved, those are truly the people that help shape policy and direction. What I'm learning as a commissioner is, as these processes start, we start at the ground level and we look at the biological component. We look at the biological need, and that's what our biologists do, and they do it better than anybody in the nation. I'm just impressed with the biology gathering that we do for our wildlife populations. And then it comes up a step, starts the public comment period, the public meeting comment process. That's where the public gets to input. That's where landowners get to input. If it's for some specific game management issues, season settings, there's meetings with private landowners before the public gets to make comment, which I think is critical because so much of our population is dependent on private land, and our private landowners do such a phenomenal job of providing habitat to those populations. So we do the biological need we establish, we get the private landowners' input, we take direction then through the public comment and the public meeting process from the public, and then the department will try and mold a direction or a policy around that, and the commission has the final say on that, whether it's financial or policy or priority. And those three components are huge. And without that public input, there's really a huge hole in that decision-making model. The public's input is vital to the decisions we make, where we establish corridors, where we establish wildlife crossings, where we do any of those management decisions. So I encourage the public to attend their local region meetings, get involved.
So showing up's half the battle.
It is. It is. You know, if I go to a bear meeting and my department biological request is we can substantiate 6 spring quota bears, but I get 50 emails from the public and they come and the biological need can support it, we can go from a quota of 6 to a quota of 9, just like that, because the public's desire, the public's passion, the public's input is that strong. And so I encourage public input at any level they can. Always the public's invited to come to a commission meeting. We have time set aside for that. Jess is always a great one to put in her sheet and come and talk. She does a great job. So it's like anything, it's get involved. Your voice will be heard.
The Wyoming Game and Fish Commission is also a wonderful commission to sit in front of and talk to. I feel like there's discussions that happen, there's questions that are asked, and it's a lot of times I think public comment can feel intimidating, and to your benefit and to everybody's benefit, you guys are very easy to talk to. It's an easy commission to communicate with, and we're very grateful for that.
Fantastic. Good.
And I would say, so in a prior life, I used to be at the Attorney General's office, and I had David DeWald's job, and used to represent the commission. And obviously the commission's turned over since I was in that role.
Sure.
But just the decisions that you have to deal with, and the pull that you have from so many directions, from not just the department, but from different constituencies in the public, to be able to come to a place where, for most people, walk out. And Jess was talking before you got here about the extremes of advocacy and how we have to kind of cut the extremes off and work on this, the radical center. And the radical center that shows up to these meetings, the way that you're able to balance that, and now and historically, and I'm sure into the future, it's absolutely commendable, because you have a state where, in this state, something like 16 to 18% of the public hunts, and then everybody knows somebody that hunts. So you have virtually 100% of the population that's a biologist,
right?
And you have to make these decisions, being judged. And so I really appreciate the role that you've taken on, and thank you for this service to the commission. But I think it's worth the public and everybody that's listening here to know just how thoughtful commissioners are in their deliberations about all of these issues facing wildlife, and how seriously you take that role as the steward of this trust resource.
Well, we sure do, and that's certainly what I'm learning. As just a new commissioner, I've gotten to eat a shoe sandwich a couple times without knowing the facts, just going with my gut. But the more that you take and listen from different people, the better decisions you can make. So I try and represent my 3 counties and what I hear from them, and the rest of it is just, we all have something in common. Let's find that and find a direction we can all go, and then just give her heck and go all out. So, yep, well, it's a good time.
What I was going to say is I want to say thanks. So it's been it's been well over a decade ago, and the first time I ever worked in policy was when I had the opportunity to work with you. And so it was really, a change from being just a pure scientist into having to deal with members of the public. And if I have an agricultural ilk, and I do, which is I do. I blame you.
Well, all righty then. I think that's a good thing, Jess, right?
Success, right?
Right, yeah. Oh, good.
Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, you bet, guys.
It.
Thanks for letting me jump on here, and always pleased to talk about Wyoming inner wildlife.
Well, we really appreciate it, and we know that there are a lot of people that you want to continue to visit with about it. But
you bet, I'm back into it.
We appreciate you taking the time, so thanks so much.
Thanks, you bet.
All right. So, Jess, let's pick up where we left off before Ralph joined us. And before we do, I'd say my hope is that we're going to have several other people join us. I think I mentioned we're hoping we can catch the governor's attention.
If he sees you in that T-shirt, he'll leave.
I know, he might. See you in the morning. More people just coming up, right? This is fantastic, right? And so we're hoping to get more people to join us, and we can talk about issues around advocacy. And that's really, that's why we're here. That's what we're talking about is sportsmen and women as advocates for hunters, for hunting and wildlife and the land. These issues that we talk about all the time on this podcast. And we have this great opportunity to continue this discussion about, okay, what does it take to be an advocate, a citizen advocate for these issues? And it's hard to remember where we left off, but I think
we talked a little bit about the classes that, you're bringing people in and teaching them what to do.
Let's talk about those classes. So what do you do? You told us that you started the day with some training, some classes. Yeah. What do you do during those sessions?
Well, so I think we left off in saying, I walked into the legislature 4 or 5 years ago and said, there's a need here, and we're not communicating well. And went back and sat down with Wyoming Wildlife Federation staff and brainstormed over how do we change this? How do we make this better? And what we came to was a early iteration of what Camo at the Capitol has now turned into, which is a citizen lobby training. It's a let's bring folks from around the state down to their legislature here in Cheyenne, Wyoming, sit in the Capitol, and prior to that, let's give them the training to feel confident about what they're talking about, to be effective at what they're talking about, and to be well educated on that. So when we are representing hunters and anglers around the state, we're representing it well. We're representing it with respect, and we're representing it in the sense of we're passionate about this, but we're also here to work on this problem. We're not here to just lob bombs across the aisle. We're here to find solutions.
And maybe make people feel comfortable about engaging. Sometimes there's a reluctance or a nervousness about picking up the phone and calling your legislative leader or your governor's office or your game and fish department, right? Letting people know that they should be comfortable doing that.
For here in Wyoming, and I know this podcast is listened much further outside of the state, but for here in Wyoming, we're very lucky in the sense that we have a citizen legislature. We have our legislators are our neighbors. Our governor is our neighbor.
I just saw him in Albertsons the other day. we passed in the produce aisle.
I did too. I saw him and Bob Bud right before the Super Bowl. Literally before I saw you at the Super Bowl party. I was like, "Hey, Governor."
Yeah,
they're people that you run into
right?
in the grocery store. These are people that are just like everyone else. They have a vested and passionate interest in Wyoming in all of its aspects, and per legislator. I think it's on the House side, it's 7,000 citizens per legislator. On the Senate side, it's 9,000 citizens per legislator. That's incredible compared to the rest of the country. And we really do get to call up our legislator and say, like, hey, do you want to have a cup of coffee? Let's talk about some things I have some problems with. But the other side of that is that you still address them as senator. You still address them as representative. You still give them respect that their office deserves. They do a ton of work. When you go out to
coffee with them, do you dress up at all? Or do you wear a T-shirt and jeans?
Ask me. I have done Dancing with the Stars with one of our legislators. So,
Dave's just feeling self-conscious about his T-shirt now. So don't.
It's his too. You know.
But it's a fair question.
Most of the
it's a fair question.
No, it's a legitimate question.
To be fair, if you're calling your legislator and they're willing to meet you for coffee, they're willing to do it. As long as you pay them the respect. These are people that are working for, in Wyoming, it's per diem. It's $150 a day.
To be a legislator.
You are working here because you care about the state. So if you're taking their time, give them that respect. That doesn't mean, if you're comfortable in jeans and a T-shirt, that's fine. Go sit down, have coffee. The thing that I'm saying is be respectful. We can disagree. We can absolutely disagree, but we can also still be friends. Yeah. And that is what we're taking this Camo at the Capitol and saying, for the hunting and angling voice, for the wildlife voice, for the conservation voice, the best thing we can do is be a player at the table. Be someone that's willing to work together. Be someone that's willing to compromise when it's needed. Because we can either draw a hard line in the stand and lob a bomb across the aisle, or we can reach a hand across and say, let's work together. Let's find a compromise. None of us are going to get everything we want, but we're all going to get something we want. And that's better than the status quo.
So is that
better than what it says.
Is that your messaging in the training?
It's absolutely our messaging in the training. We talk about, as I saw everything that happened the first time I sat in this legislature, and I was like, the hunting and angling voice is missing. We need to do something more about it. Creating this training was like, okay, so first we have to educate them, and we have to talk about how a bill even becomes law, because we have to smash high school civics into a 15-minute presentation, which we do. But we have to talk about the mechanism of it, the mechanics of the legislature, and the effectiveness of it. How do we engage? How do we go further? How do we take our voice and amplify it?
You could give them homework before they show up by making them listen to this podcast.
Your Mountain
That's right. Your Mountain Podcast will give you all the advocacy training you need.
We're fully advertising just an open bar at this point to get people here. So.
That does it too.
It's the same thing.
We're basically an open bar.
Open bar, it works.
No, we're basically an open bar.
Well, I love what you said, and I think it's so important. And when you talked about giving your time and giving your best, I think it's important that everybody remembers, in a way, when you sit down and talk with your legislature, it is like a job interview. Mm-hmm. It's like sales, because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to impress these people enough that you're hoping that whatever you're passionate about becomes something that they're passionate about. And you have to be able to present that in a way where, where your issue doesn't seem like it's not an angry, wacky, crazy issue, but it's something where they sit down and they go, I talked to Jess Johnson and I was really impressed. I think I believe that. And that's what you have to do when you're working with these folks. You're educating, you're you're selling, your ad. I mean, that's what effective advocacy is.
Yeah, my position as a lobbyist is like I see myself as the person that delivers the science and facts. I deliver the fact sheet. I talk about here's the pros and cons of something. I try and build these relationships face to face. But as a citizen, and as someone that's running this Camo at the Capitol training, what I'm trying to do is bring the citizen voice that brings the real life experience to these issues. The people that have we had a wild bison licenses bill that is going through, and basically this bill is fixing a loophole that Wyoming has where large game, most of big game is if I have a extensive injury or I get deployed or there's a massive thing that happens in your life and you can't hunt, they defer the license a year. But because bison are designated as not just big game in Wyoming, we have multiple
agricultural, they're livestock.
They're kind of a special designation here.
Yeah. Wildlife, not big game.
We forgot them sort of in this loophole that lets us defer it. And there's
you should expand the deferral, by the way. I don't mean to interrupt you, but the deferral doesn't apply to it. If you have a criminal trial, if you're an attorney
T-shirts.
and you have a criminal trial.
It's true. It's because it doesn't apply to Dave.
I'm just giving you an example.
No, Dave's already blown his one time in a lifetime, so he's talking to me about if I have a trial.
I'm just letting him know ahead of time. So if you're an attorney
you
and you have
to be physically crippled.
No, you don't. There are other things too. So there are other exceptions too. So one exception is if you are an attorney and you are a criminal attorney and you've got a trial, you can actually get a deferral if that trial is going to cover the duration of that hunting season. However, if you are an attorney and you have a civil trial,
doesn't defer.
It does not defer. And I can tell you that there are some civil trials that can last weeks and or months.
It sounds like
really
experience.
Can put you in an awkward position.
So if you are the attorney, the one that listens to this podcast,
we're working on
I'm advocating. I'm talking to my lobbyist right now, who's going to take this message back to the legislature and get this exception expanded. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No. I think that's actually really good though, because someone can come and talk to me, and I can take that. I can go and say, I have this person that I met, and here's their story, and that is also impactful. Mm-hmm. I can bring the facts of it. I can talk about the loopholes. I can talk about the economics of it and what it brings to Wyoming and all of that kind of thing. But until the person that shows up and says, I drew a wild bison license, and after I drew it, I was deployed, and I wasn't even in state. I was across seas for this. Until that person shows up and looks their legislator in the eye and has that, I don't want to call it anecdotal evidence, but it's this thing of it's this story. It's this personal thing where you have lived through it and it has affected you, until they show up and look them in the eyes and say, this was an issue and I experienced this. My voice is only so powerful. So what I saw was we need more people that have the actual personal lived experience here, and they need to be here and talk about it. So we started Camo at the Capitol, which brought hunters and anglers from around the state of Wyoming down. It taught them how a bill becomes law. It taught them how the legislature works, how the executive office interacts with it, how the press interacts with it, all of these nuances around that. And then we take them to the Capitol. We introduce them to their decision makers, and we say, these are the people you talk to. If you have problems, if you are think something can work better, if something's not working for you, these are the people you talk to. It doesn't mean that you're going to be listened to 100% of the time, but it's a damn sight better than not being listened to at all. And it teaches you a respectful way to interact with your decision maker, because at the end, we're all people. We all have passions. We're all talking across the table. And at some point, we have to find some common ground. So until we go face to face with someone, we're not going to get there.
Yeah. So I want to build off of that in a second, but I do have to circle back really quickly to the bison example you gave. No,
I knew I could pick a good one.
No, this is good. I'm going to give you a story to take as you're talking about this bison exception, because I got to thinking, have we talked about my story related to this?
I was about to lift your story to a new level rather than tell my own. I just want you to know
and then do that. But I want.
We're 85 podcasts in addition to all of the times we've sat around the campfire and I've
You've
heard your
heard this a
stories.
bunch.
I know.
Yeah.
So I can't tell.
So you don't know if I've.
I have
So I'm going to
no-
do it
Has it
again.
been
no
recorded
idea.
or has
I
it
don't know if
been-
it has or not. I'm
Okay,
going to do it
get to
because
it.
it's relevant here. So I drew a wild bison tag in 2010 or 11. I don't remember which year. Anyway, I drew this tag, and back then when they were running the hunt, you didn't have to buy the license. You could draw that. You drew your priority number, and you didn't have to pay for the license right up front. That's changed now. But at the time, it was you drew a priority number, and the priority number was for when you could hunt on the National Elk Refuge. And you wanted to get those first 2 weeks or first week, whatever it was. September 1st is when the season started. You wanted that, right? Because you knew there was a pretty good chance there were going to be bison on there that had been there from the summer coming on to feed because they were, they have center pivots and they're just good grass there and they're coming on. You think you have an actual pretty good chance of getting one. So you want that. If you don't get that, you want to get one towards the end of the season once the snow starts flying and it pushes them from the park back onto the refuge. I drew the first 2 week season. I had a high priority number. I drew the first 2 week of the season. Right after I drew that, I was working a case at the time, and a judge set a summary judgment motion hearing for opening day of
Which a summary judgment motion hearing is kind of like.
Is this where we hear about the civil case? versus
right.
something else?
Should I go get? I'm going to go to tell them that.
I'm telling a very Wyoming story. You'll see in a
wake
second.
me.
But that kind of
You'll see in a
motion
second.
is a make or break case. I mean, it's a significant thing for your livelihood and your job.
It's a very big deal, right? But drawing this bison tag is also a very big deal. So what happened is I call up, we have a status conference, and we're talking about the scheduling for this, and I tell the judge, I'm just honest. I say, look, I drew this bison tag, Your Honor, and it's scheduled at the same time that you've set this hearing date. And I wondered if I could appear by phone from the elk refuge because I'm going to
in my T-shirt
because I'm going to be on this hunt. And
I've called in staff calls from the mountain.
And the judge granted my request. And so I'm out there on the refuge on opening morning, and I just messed up. I didn't mess up. Somebody else screwed me out of a bison that morning. Anyway, I climbed.
I climbed.
That's a separate story. No, that's a separate story. I climbed up to the top of Blacktail Butte on the north end of the refuge so I could get a good cell signal because it hits a tower back in Jackson. And I call into the hearing. And the judge, you have to do the formalities of making your appearance and so forth. And the judge says, so how's the hunt going, Mr. Williams? And he legitimately wanted to know how the hunt was going.
It's a very Wyoming story.
And I thought this is the most amazing, this is why I practice law in Wyoming.
I'm sure it's more exciting than anything you were going to talk about that day. Your hunt.
Oh, my hunt was way more exciting than the motion.
Yeah.
It was. I don't even remember what the
there
case
I
was.
Judge, holding a bag of popcorn, shaking it until that buffalo came over.
So
yeah, right. Had a bag of apples, cut them up nice.
Speaking of advocacy in the Capitol,
so I just wanted to provide that perspective because I would not have been able to get a deferral. So if I didn't have a favorable judge, if I didn't have a judge that was really receptive to my situation, I wouldn't have been able to use that bison tag at the beginning of the season on the refuge for the dates I drew. So anyway,
which is
continue.
I think another
Right, that's a
argument to
big
just
deal.
move to Wyoming.
That's a
but
big
also
deal.
don't. Maybe.
So
right, but it's also I'm just giving you another test case for your another
the
example
advice that
for
you gave before Dave went on
just
his
has to do that
lobbying.
tangent.
Are you going to lift it up?
Yeah, I mean, what you
up.
talked about getting people to come in and talk to their legislator, and then what you've done with Camo in the Capitol. If you're listening to this and you're in a state that doesn't have an event called Camo in the Capitol, build it.
And reach
and
out
multiple
to us.
states
I mean, really, as Wyoming Wildlife Federation,
Because
we've talked with many other states.
Multiple
We've sat
states have
down.
them now,
Well, and they're
right?
working on them
They're
because we
powerful.
started it, and it had that little seed of goodness.
So who
that
all
was something.
has? What other states are doing it now?
Idaho, Colorado, New Mexico. It sounds like Nevada will next year.
Is Montana doing one
Montana.
And participate. If you already have one, participate. Because what you find is, Jess, you're absolutely right. What really makes a difference, I mean, it's great to have folks who are good at talking to lawmakers on your behalf. It elevates it hugely when you can put a group of people together, whether they're wearing camo or whatever, and they can be identified as all part of the same group, and they all come there together with one voice and one purpose, it changes. It changes the dynamic. It's effective. And especially when, as you said, like when you learn the lessons, when you have the right bullet, when you all are on the same wavelength with your talking points, when you're respectful, when you have integrity, and you have intelligence, you can do amazing things.
And I feel like the thing that I would say is that when you're doing this, and I'm a lobbyist, I can say that I have all the fact sheets and I've done all the research and all that kind of thing, but I'm only so effective as the people behind me. And I would say the same as the legislators. People are elected. They work for you. When you are in a legislature, you are a senator or a representative. You represent the people in your district. And as someone that is the constituent of someone, they deserve that respect for even running for that. I mean, I've thought about running for office and that kind of thing. It's scary to think about. It's expensive. It is a ton of things to learn. You're just walking out on this balance beam and hoping that you don't topple off one side or the other. You're trying to find where your true north is and where your constituents' true north is. And it's guided by folks on the side that are saying, I care about this, I'm passionate about this, please listen to me. And when you bring folks down and they talk with people, that has more impact than anything I've ever seen. And whether it's a Camo at the Capitol, whether it is you are part of an NGO and they send out a form letter and they say something like, please sign on to this or please send this. The best thing you can do is represent your voice. So if you get a form letter, alter it. Put something of you in there. Be respectful. If it's not the voice that you would use, change it. If it has facts in it, definitely incorporate those. But put it in something that you say. Because if you're talking, I don't care if it's Wyoming, if it's any other state, or if it's your national delegation, make it personal. And there's so many things going on in this world. Whoever you are, whether it's wildlife, whether it's conservation, whether it's social justice, things feel like they're a little bit on fire most of the time. Triage it. Find things that you're very passionate about, educate yourself about it, and then sit down and write a real letter. That will be more impactful than signing on to any petition, any form letter, or anything else. And if people do that, if they take care of their backyard, if they take care of the people they know, if they take care of their state legislators, and if they are respectful to their national delegation, who is bending over backwards most of the times, you have no idea what...
Stop trolling on Facebook.
I know.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, really.
Stop trolling on Facebook.
You have no idea what people are dealing with from these. There are inside pressures that none of us on the outside see. And those of us that walk into the inside, we see it and we can't talk about it in a way that is effective. So understand that when folks are making decisions, even if they're not the decisions you would make, it's usually for a pretty decent reason.
Have respect for them and try and understand before being understood.
Exactly. It's walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And that kind of thing, that's where we're going to see our politics work at a point where it's beneficial for the people. That lobbing bombs, the talking and reactionary, knee-jerk kind of things is not going to get us anywhere. But a passionate, well-versed, factual, and respectful thing, that will land. My mother wrote a handwritten note to our congresswoman who disagrees with a lot of things that my mom agrees with. But my mom wrote a handwritten note that sent photos of what she did, talked about her experiences, and she got a phone call back. Like, that says something. Whether you agree or not, whether it ends up on the same page, people will communicate when you actually care.
That's right. And I hate to cut you off. We're going to come back in a second, but it looks like we have Governor Gordon coming over to join us.
Sounds good. We'll wrap up, and we'll catch up later.
We'll continue this discussion after we have this conversation with the governor.
Thank you, guys.
So we're joined now by Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Really appreciate it. We're at the Camo at the Capitol event here at the beautiful Botanic Gardens here in Cheyenne, and we really want to, first of all, thank you for coming to this event tonight.
Well, you're welcome. And being at Camo at the Capitol in the Botanic Gardens, it's hard to see anybody here.
Yeah, right.
It is. Yeah, but that's how we like it. We just blend in. That's the goal.
That's right.
Easy to be a wallflower.
So the whole point of the day has really been to educate sportsmen about the government, the legislative process,
Right.
and how to interact with both the legislative branch and the executive branch of government and be effective advocates. And now we're all getting together to celebrate the work of you and of the legislature and celebrate Wyoming. And we just want to know from your perspective, what do you take away from events like this, and how important do you think the sporting community, the hunters, are to advancing policy in the state?
Well, honestly, I think sportsmen carry an enormous amount of weight. You just think about the resource that we have here. One of the greatest industries that Wyoming has, one that is a renewable resource. It's great to have your family out in the field. It's so important, and the fact that sportsmen would come to Cheyenne and spend time learning how to interact, how bills move, how to work with the executive branch, and then ultimately, and this is the nice thing, I can remember coming here as a little kid, and Wyoming was always a place where, there was work to be done during the day in the Capitol, but in the evening, people would get together, kind of bury hatchets, talk about what's best for the state going forward, and it's nice to have events like this because then the sportsman's voice is heard in that whole conversation.
And if you had one piece of advice for sportsmen, now that you've been in this role as the chief executive officer of the state of Wyoming now for over a year, just past the year mark, and if you had one piece of advice for sportsmen for how to engage with the executive branch, how to be effective advocates for sporting issues, what would that be?
Well, I think first and foremost, you need to know that your voice matters. In this state, it matters a lot more than it does in a lot of others because our voices count. That's first. And then second, I think it's important as you express your views that you also listen carefully to the conversation and understand where that person's coming from. It doesn't mean your point is any less valid or different. It just means that you're starting to communicate, and then eventually, I think, what is the right course will emerge. Sometimes it takes a long time to get something passed, but I really think that Wyoming has a great recipe. You get people together. You've got senators and representatives here tonight. You've got members of the cabinet, and then you've got the sportsmen.
Governor, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you one question while you're here because I think it's exciting. We're going to be the first people, I think, in our community at least, to talk to you about it. Thank you for your letter that you wrote to the National Park Service recently.
Oh, yeah.
About the depopulating goats in Grand Teton National Park.
Using aerial gunning out of helicopters.
And
right.
You were really bold, and I think a lot of people appreciate that a lot. Do you have any thoughts on that? And
well, I didn't think it was all that bold. I just pretty much said what I thought was the right thing to do, and the right thing was to pay attention to the state of Wyoming. We have a common goal. Just aerially executing goats just doesn't make sense when we have the opportunity. And we've got the promise now to work on having what, it's wonderful federal language, skilled volunteers, but this is what we do in Wyoming. One of the great things I think about our state, and I think about the history of our state, is the fact that we were the first state to really come up with a game and fish. We understood the value of our game. We wanted to make sure it was well managed, and it's just so important that we have a primacy in that.
Well, a lot of people don't know this, but I know it from a significant amount of time of knowing you both before being governor and then now. You really are a sportsman governor. I mean, it's not something that you just, say. It's like it's who you are, and I think all of us really recognize and appreciate that this is these issues are near and dear to you, and it's real. And so just want to say thanks.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I'll just end it with, I have to say, give one more thank you, because you sent this letter about the mountain goats in Grand Teton National Park, but you also did something also pretty amazing within the past couple of weeks, and your leadership on your executive order for migration corridors for mule deer and pronghorn is an example for the rest of the West. And I just want to thank you for taking that on, and the process that you established to include every sector imaginable, to get feedback and thoughts to find the right balance for wildlife and the economy.
Well, thank you, and that's exactly where we were trying to go. And it's important that, that was where the sportsman's community became so valuable in this discussion. Just to, it was a little bit out of norm, and people were really worried about what was going to go. And we sat down, tried to figure out the best way forward, and then we protected it. And it was the sportsmen who showed up and said, this is a good compromise, this is the proper way forward. And so I have to thank the sportsman's community for showing up for that one.
Well, we all appreciate it, and we know that you've got to run. It's the legislative session. You have to be everywhere.
Thanks for taking a couple of moments.
So we appreciate taking this time.
There's a reason why he's the most popular governor. He's got to go meet some more people, right?
That's right.
Most popular governor in the nation right now. All right.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Governor.
Really a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Mm-hmm. Bye.
So we are joined now by the director of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, Brian Nesvik. Brian, thank you for taking the time to sit down with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
This is kind of a weird situation, right?
It's a little different, yeah. Yeah, a little different for sure.
Yeah. Normally, in the past, I was in the advisory capacity.
I can't believe you took advice from this guy. You didn't, did you?
Not
did you
always.
Really?
Advice is just that. You can take it or leave it. And, I won't say any more than that.
And he typically left it, which is why the department's in a far better place now than it would have been if you'd taken any of it. Anyway, so earlier we had the chance to talk with Governor Gordon, and we were talking about this event today. So it started out with Camo at the Capitol, and sportsmen descending upon the Capitol and learning about how to be effective advocates with the legislative branch and the executive branch, and then we've moved on here to this reception tonight, where we're kind of getting together and celebrating Wyoming's wildlife and the work of your agency and the governor and the legislature. And so, first of all, I want to ask you, what do events like this mean to you? Like, having the sportsmen come together and celebrate wildlife and to celebrate accomplishments of the department, what does it mean?
Yeah, you know what? At the end of the day, I think that if you take a step back and you think about what this event really means, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of people that are, rekindling old relationships, and they're talking about cool hunting stories from last fall. But I think what the key takeaway from these kind of events is it's a celebration of what we all really treasure. I mean, the reason that we all came down here and did all those things you just talked about today with Camo at the Capitol, and the reason that we have groups like the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, is because people are so passionate, care so much about wildlife, and these things celebrate that. And doing them several times throughout the year is good. I mean, there's goodness that comes from celebrating what we all care so much about.
Well, go ahead, Nephi.
I've had the opportunity to be around a couple different states this year, and to interact with a variety of legislators and governors on different legislation, and it's powerful when you get folks who are passionate about these issues, and they all show up together with the same color shirts on, and just kind of like, whether it's camo or blue or whatever color they choose, or gray or whatever, it makes a huge difference having legislators see, not just know the people who are out there, but see constituents in person and have them interacting in a courteous manner, in an intelligent way. It makes people change their minds. It drives them to do the right thing, if you will. So it's awesome.
So I want to ask you a question. And so there are a lot of people that listen to this. We come at this podcast from a policy standpoint, so we only have like 10 people that are really passionate about policy. We have an audience spread across the country, And they're passionate hunters, and they're passionate about the issues around surrounding wildlife and water and the land. And they want to know how they can be effective advocates. So sitting in your seat now as the director of the Game and Fish Department, what would you tell hunters around the country as far as how do they make their voice heard? What's the best way from your perspective to make their voice heard with a wildlife agency?
Well, I think, you know what, David, from my perspective, it's a hell of a lot more about the approach and the ability to interpersonally communicate than it is about the position. And let me explain that a little bit. I will tell you that what I see as far as people that are effective, they're able to sit down and have a conversation like the five of us are having right now, look each other in the eye, and say what's on our mind, and not take extreme positions. And what I see fail in the policy world, not just with what we do, not just with wildlife conservation, but with policy in general, is those people that are on take extreme positions either way just aren't as effective. Those folks that are making decisions on what policies are going to be implemented, like a lot of the senators and representatives we have here tonight, they, for the most part, they're turned off by the extremes. They want to talk to somebody like Jess here, to my right, because she has an ability to find a way to get to yes without taking in a position that most people think is just kind of on the fringe either way. My advice is, and maybe to get even a little bit more specific, then taking that message to the folks that are actually going to create policy. And again, you got to kind of look at them too. And going to those folks that typically take the real extreme positions, if you notice, they're not real effective. And you got to find those folks that are better able to find, common ground. And in Wyoming, which is what I'm familiar with, that's what works.
And I think every single one of us here would agree with you, and we preach that all the time on this podcast.
You didn't even cue me up for this.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's like we didn't even give you the script or the talking points.
Yeah.
And I think you just have reinforced what is a great message, and I hopefully resonates. I know you have to get back, and there are a lot of people that want to be able to visit with you, but I'd be remiss if we didn't talk for a few minutes about some of the recent work. You made an announcement recently, a new partnership, a new initiative you're working with the Wyoming Department of Transportation on. And I think this is something that will resonate with people all across the country as something that can work here but can be replicated in other places.
Sure.
And I was hoping you could talk for a few minutes about that initiative.
Absolutely. So, there's another part about being effective from my perspective is finding those issues where a lot of people can kind of gather around them and get behind them. And so, in short, there are very few people in this world that can find any goodness that comes from a dead deer laying on the side of the highway that got there because it got hit by a vehicle.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's just nothing good that comes from that. And so folks can really rally around the idea that stopping that is a good thing. And we've realized that in Wyoming there's a lot of momentum behind that. Now there's a lot of discussion about these migration corridors, which are really important. There's a lot of discussion about maintaining functionality of these big game herds and maintaining their viability for the long term. But one of the things that a lot of folks, whether you're into wildlife or not, can really get behind and say, this is a good idea, is something related to letting those wildlife cross the road, where it's a public safety issue, it's a big game management issue, and they come together and in Wyoming we really value wildlife, but we have long distances between towns, and so having highways is really important too. And so we've gotten together with YDOT and other partners, and we have put together an initiative and an ask of our people to contribute to wildlife crossings, and to, if you want to find a place to put some money towards something really good, put it towards wildlife crossings. If you want to help with doing something that a lot of folks, we can kind of set the model for what right looks like around the country, contribute to a crossing. It's a great opportunity to do cool stuff for wildlife and for you know what? For those of us that have kids, I can tell you I worry about that. My son took off on Sunday night and headed back to the University of Wyoming to go to school, and I was worried about him hitting an elk, So for those of us that...
Exactly where at? Were you worried about him?
Yeah, that's right.
Could you give me those coordinates?
I can tell you exactly where it was. It's got to be about,
I know, I'm just kidding.
Buford and about 3 miles west of Buford.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, 3 miles west of Buford. Yeah.
When you say an elk, do you mean like one elk, or do you mean like... No. Can I ask you a controversial question since we have you?
Absolutely.
There's Wyoming's always people are always interested in what's going on with our game and fish.
Mm-hmm.
Nationally, they care. And it used to be one of the reasons that they care, right? It's because everybody lining up for elk hunt. Mm-hmm. Where's the first place that they drop their coin down is in Wyoming to see if they get a non-resident tag. There was some controversy this year about a change in the process about when that tag would be drawn. Have you had any questions about that, about the change to the later date for the results coming out for non-residents, and can you just give a little bit of rationale behind that and kind of what what you tell people who are concerned about it to kind of put them at ease? What's your thoughts?
Absolutely. So first I'll tell you that for a long time we've had an application period that ends in January for non-residents, and then a drawing that occurs, but the drawing isn't really official yet because you got to get through the formal part where the commission sets a season in April. Sometimes seasons change. I mean, if they didn't change, then the commission wouldn't be doing their job.
Yep.
And so we've had complaints in the past from folks who signed up for this, the commission made a decision and changed it to that, and then they weren't getting the same thing at the end of the day with their license that they thought they were getting. Some of the bigger, more controversial things was like when a season changed from being able to hunt archery or rifle, but changed to archery only for a certain part of the season.
Yep.
And so anyway, the interest from the commission and a lot of the public was in moving that application date, the draw date, the notification time after the commission actually makes their decision. Another concern, though, for some of our outfitted hunters and their outfitters is being the first to the game, having the first opportunity to get into the draw in Wyoming. And so, that's been a part of our culture for a long time. Elk has been in January forever. And so the outfitters were interested in us still maintaining that, allowing people to withdraw and modify up till the actual drawing time, or apply a break in time. If something changed, then you could actually go in and modify your application. But they wanted to maintain that early
So they wanted people to be able to put in early.
Right.
But also you guys felt, the real reason for this, and there's been lots of speculation, Wyoming wants to put your check into the account for a month. But the reality was...
To get that 1/10 of 1% interest.
The reality was this was a decision that was made so that the actual seasons would be set so that people, if they needed to withdraw, they could withdraw, or they'd know when they drew exactly what they were getting.
Exactly.
Rather than, hey, I drew, and then, because I've seen this, even as an in-stater, where it's like you plan, you're like, oh yeah, this is where I'm going to go hunt this species this time, and then you get a change of a week or 2 weeks, and if you're planning out, then suddenly it changes the entire plan. That's what you guys were seeking to avoid with this change.
Yeah, and you're right too. I had that question the other day about the interest, and it's just it's insignificant. I mean, it's not a money making issue. It's more of a trying to find the spot in the middle where everybody can feel comfortable.
It was a public. The idea was to be a customer service approach. And
Absolutely.
That was the goal.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So, last question from me, and I want to ask something controversial too. But to be fair, we talked to the governor about this. So we're going to see if your answers are the same.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. So we're in. Technically today it's the 25th. As we're recording this, is the 25th of February, and late last week, the governor sent a letter to the Secretary of Interior and the acting director of Grand Teton National Park. You know where I'm going already, right? Grand Teton National Park, asking them to end a proposed aerial gunning of mountain goats in the park that was slated to occur and it was set to start this week.
Right.
At the beginning of this week, the Secretary of Interior intervened and stopped it at the last second, so that did not occur. My question to you, well, first of all, I think based on what we've seen from just as far as probably the same things you've seen, just the outpour of response to this, people are genuinely happy with that decision by the Secretary to back off of this. The question is, what comes next? Because we do know that there are those concerns about disease transmission between the native bighorn sheep population and the introduced, the non-native mountain goat population.
Right.
So what do you envision the next steps being?
And before you talk about that, I'd like to note that I do have a friend who knows how to fly helicopters.
Yeah, and so if you want to deputize us right now.
No, go ahead.
Like right here.
Right, yeah. So
I
I do want to, David, before I start, I do want to make sure I get, I want to make sure the record's correct, okay?
Of course.
So actually going back a long time, we've articulated a concern about this hunt. They actually were going to begin it in January. I wrote them a letter, and my commission condemned the action then.
So you were in front of this.
We did that even a year ago.
I failed to mention that, but yeah, this has been. The state has been objecting to this for some time.
Right,
yeah.
and even up to a year ago. But anyway, Friday we learned that they were headed up. And
They're fueling up the helicopter.
They were going to go do it. And so I made one last call and said, hey, don't do this. Well, they did. They actually did go, and they did shoot some mountain goats. The operation started. Okay. And the governor's letter came probably simultaneous to that going on. He and I talked right after I'd talked with the park, and so he issued that letter, and they did one afternoon of the operation, stopped, and then from there, the secretary got involved, and now the governor and I met with him today, and we're comfortable in our place where the aerial operation is done. So what does it look like going forward, to get to your question? So where we agreed today is I think that there's a couple other options: relocation, and then this is their term, not mine, skilled volunteer route. I call it using hunters to manage wildlife.
These three dudes.
Yeah, these three dudes right here.
How skilled?
Yeah.
We're recording this, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Director Nesvik is on the record as calling us all skilled hunters.
There you go.
Even the guy in the T-shirt.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, that and about 25 cents will get you a cup of coffee. But yeah. Anyway, I do see an opportunity to, there's definitely this was a rough spot with the park and our relationship because we felt very disrespected by their decision to do this. But we agreed today to look at ways that we can move forward with. Helping them to develop a skilled volunteer program. That's, again, their terms. I've articulated multiple times that the idea of using hunters to manage big game species and really a lot of wildlife has been tested for 100 years, more than 100 years, and it's worked extremely effectively. And so why wouldn't that be a tool we could use here?
And it's been used in Grand Teton National Park specifically for
elk. It has.
For decades.
And they've got some rules. They've got some federal case law that they've got to follow. They've got legal opinions. They've got some sideboards. I don't want to discount that at all, and we're willing to listen to all that. But we want to try to find a way in the middle where there's some type of using hunters to manage this particular population. That aligns much better with Wyoming values than shooting them out of helicopters and leaving them lay up there.
And do you know, is that what happened with these? Did they leave them up there?
My understanding is they did. They didn't retrieve any carcasses.
That's what I understood was going to happen.
Yes.
But I didn't know if you could verify it or not.
I can.
Yeah, okay. Well, that was I just wanted, we've had, there's so many people that are interested in that topic.
I'll tell you what, David, it's the first time I've talked about this all day.
Yeah. I'm sure nobody's ever asked, right? But it's across the country, though, that people are interested in this.
Yeah.
And so...
really what you're doing is just, you're saying, there's a paradigm for how we manage these resources. It's the North American model of conservation. Just let us work.
Exactly.
Because I will let you know, we went elk hunting this last fall in an area where you put the objective at 0. And congratulations. You guys
succeeded.
You're very good when you decide you don't want any animals in a given area.
You were in Hunt Area 66.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was. Which used to be a big secret, but now everybody put in your tag. Go ahead. I really don't care if you all know.
Yeah, it's been a successful program. Huh?
Yeah.
Or Nephi's not quite as skilled of a hunter as he makes
I wasn't
going to
say that, David. I was trying to be nice here.
I know, I'm willing to say it, though.
I'm going to chime in here, I think, as the only bow hunter at the table, speaking of skilled hunters, but, you know.
I actually am a bow hunter, as is
when we're
all
talking,
3 of us own bows.
Owning is different than shooting, but yes.
I have shot them
bows,
occasionally at animals.
I do have a question, because we've heard, and as the Federation has looked at what's happening with these mountain goats, we've gotten a lot of communication about where our stance is and why are we weighing in and where are we sitting on this. And a lot of questions have come up about the retrieval of the mountain goats, and I've heard very different and contrasting views about why are the retrievals harder? They're in harder terrain. As someone that maybe likes to suffer a little bit more than most folks in their hunts, that doesn't look as something that would stop me from wanting to put in for a tag. In fact, I feel like that would make me want to put in for a tag more. But I had heard some discussion around that, and is that something that you guys have an answer to around? We had heard that some of the reason that they aerial gunned it is that it's hard to even get the carcasses out, and I don't know if that has any validity.
Yeah, so I really do believe that their intent with the aerial gunning was to do it quickly, and their intent behind not retrieving the carcasses was that was going to require a whole lot more effort. And they are in rugged terrain. It is winter. It would be difficult for sure. Now, if you did the same exact thing with a skilled volunteer in the fall, we've proven time and time again. We just did a hunt. I mean, the Game and Fish saw this problem a long time ago. We went to the legislature. You all know it takes forever to get a bill through the legislature. It took us 2 tries, but we got one through to give the commission the ability to go in places where we don't want to manage for mountain goats and issue almost like a general license where it didn't affect your ability to once-in-a-lifetime draw. We issued a lot of licenses, low density, not a great chance to harvest an animal, and we did that. And we just started the season this last year. Well, in this area, just adjacent to Grand Teton Park, hunters harvested and retrieved 23 mountain goats. I mean, that's what can be done with using hunters in the North American model.
Because I feel like as a hunter, if I'm going to go and shoot something, to probably even past my great risk barometer, I'm going to go and bring the carcass back. And I feel like that is something that most folks would sign on to.
None of us would go out and hunt if we didn't intend to bring the animal out.
We're bringing it back. It doesn't matter how far it is. It really
that's
literally
nice to
doesn't
hear,
matter.
because I feel like that's something where we're looking at these carcasses and if they stay out there, we're wanting to use them. It's food, it's everything else. It's part of the hunt, and if these skilled volunteers
There's
are
a lot
going
of dudes, including myself, who are bringing an elk out of the thoroughfare.
Yeah.
So what? The most remote area in the lower 48. It's not like...
It's part of the hunt, though.
Yeah. It's just what you do.
It's second-degree fun.
It's maybe
right?
third-degree fun.
Might be third-degree fun.
It's not second-degree fun.
Well, so, Director, I know we've got a crowd out there. Everybody can hear them milling around out there.
They're drinking
you've got
everything.
people to talk to, babies to kiss. All that sort of thing, all that good stuff. But we really appreciate you taking all this time with us and talking about some of these issues.
Good speech tonight. Thank you.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
Hey, I was glad to do it. You guys take care and take it easy on the young lady. She's been doing great work down here.
She is doing great work.
Yeah.
I'd like to say the same about you.
I have to ask you one question.
You got to go to the end with that, don't you, David? If you'd have said that at the beginning, I'd have taken
I know you would have left. I held my fire.
I'd have said, Nephi and Mike, get rid of his stuff.
Oh, man. We're trying.
I held my fire. So Director Nesvik, you and I go back a long way.
We do.
I teach a class at the university. You come over every year and guest lecture. And
does he teach his class in a T-shirt?
You know what? I've never seen him do that.
Because
I'd rat him out
tell
if he
you,
did.
He's giving me a hard time, but I wore this T-shirt tonight for a very specific purpose.
Yeah, look at that.
Right, we're at a sportsman's reception, and if somebody wants to read this out loud,
I don't.
Yeah, look at that.
I don't.
It's the Pittman-Robertson Conservation. I'm reading it upside down.
Machine. Since
The
1937.
champagne of taxes. $12 billion for conservation.
There you
Well, I
go.
applaud
That's
the message.
why I'm wearing it.
Well, I applaud the message. We're going to get you a tie that says that.
There you go.
I'll wear that too. You know I'm not discriminatory.
Yeah,
With the
anything
T-shirt.
free.
Anything free I wear.
Yeah, we'll,
That's right.
we'll print it on a hefty bag.
Anyway, thanks
Yes,
thanks
you will.
again
You
for
bet,
taking
guys.
the time. Really
Thanks,
appreciate it. All right, now we're back again with Jess Johnson. We've had it's been great. This has been a lot of fun. People just jumping in, jumping out, but it's kind of hard to keep track of our conversation where we were so long ago. We'd been talking about
No
what
more buffalo stories.
All right. So yeah, we did do that.
Nope,
Should I
no
talk
more.
about okay.
No.
So no more bison stories. All right. But what I do want to talk about, because I think what we were talking about was Camo at the Capitol. That's the whole point of this, is to talk about this whole event.
Yeah.
And you told us about the training, and I would say I had an opportunity to be one of your presenters today at the training, and it was a ton of fun. I wish there'd been more people. It's February, right? So the roads closed down because we have this fluke storm at the last second.
Wyoming with its Cheyenne capital.
Last year,
I-25,
right?
I-80, everything shut down.
So
At
last
some
year
point,
it was
you take what you can
last
get.
year it was great. This year it was still great, just not the same numbers as last year. We'll get them back next year when the roads are open. Every other year the roads will be open, right? So come next year. So we went from the training part to applying that training, and you were telling us about applying the training, and you actually take people that go through this program to the legislature to meet the governor, to meet legislators and legislative leaders. Can you tell me how did these advocates, how they respond to that experience?
Well, so we thought like we can train them, but really, how good is training until you put it to the test? And having someone here that can help you talk on facts and everything else, why not do it when we can do it at Camo at the Capitol? And so we take the full class. We spend 9 a.m. to about 12, noon, 12:30, and we give them every tool that we can imagine and then take them to the Capitol. We give them a tour, and we have them pull their legislators. And it was really cool because we had this, we showed up at the perfect time this year. The Senate was working on a bill that had to do with public lands and the PILT taxes, which is the payment in lieu of taxes. And we were opposing the bill that came up, but it had a very nuanced talking point on it. And we had prepped everybody, and we got to just say, hey, send a note in, pull your legislator, ask them to vote no. And then they did. They got to write this in. They got to talk with their legislator. And then they got to go watch the floor debate, which I thought was probably the best part of the whole day. And it was a really nuanced floor debate. It wasn't one of those things where it was like, here's a bill, it's good, okay, let's pass it. It was like, here's a bill, it has pros and cons. How do we decide if this is a good thing? And they watched maybe a half hour to 45 minutes of floor debate. And I was sitting there watching folks that hadn't seen this go through sit there riveted to what their legislators were saying. And this was the Senate, so in Wyoming there's 30 senators, and 45 minutes for 30 people is a long time for folks to stand up and debate whether this is a good idea or not. And, we had our stance. We were opposing the bill, but listening to the respectful conversation that happened on the floor and watching people absorb that and see how nuanced it was. Everybody had a different point. People would stand up and be like, what about this? What about this other thing? How about this kind of approach? What if we did this? And everybody was sitting there going, I'm beginning to understand why this isn't just a cut and dried, like absolutely one way or another. And that was what this whole day was about, was saying, let's take this, let's put nuance to it, let's put respect to it, let's put some understanding to it, and then you can come to your own decision. And whether we agree or disagree, we're going to play by the rules in this one. And they watched it, and it was amazing because we, as Wyoming Wildlife Federation, opposed it. We didn't expect to beat this bill on this reading. but it was a very close vote. And they had sent notes in. They had pulled people out. They had been respectful. It was a 13 to 15 vote, and there was a couple absents in that. And that was a very close vote for something that we didn't expect. And it was pretty cool to see. And we talked about all of that. And then we went to the House side, and we were able to lobby on wildlife crossings and things like that. But that Senate vote was something that I was very excited for folks that hadn't seen that kind of nuance happen.
I think that's fantastic, just providing that opportunity. And fast forward a few hours, and you bring all these people with some of the same senators and representatives that they'd just been lobbying, and you get them into a room in this reception with, I don't know how many people came through tonight. A lot, right? This was a well-attended reception, and then now they have the opportunity to do advocacy a slightly different way, which is you get out of the formality of the legislative setting and the process of the legislature, and you get those legislators in a more casual setting like this type of reception, and then you can.
We all know the best work is done with a beer in the hand.
You got it, right?
It's that kind of thing where you can go and be formal, and you have your name badge and your talking points and your fact sheet, and you go to Capitol, and you're in this sort of situation where you have to be very formal, and then you can come to these legislative receptions. It doesn't mean you can't be formal. It just means that
it doesn't have to be formal. You can wear T-shirts too.
You can have a thermal and a T-shirt.
Only if you don't want people to take you seriously, Dave. Only if you don't want people.
But you don't have to be formal. You don't have to do any of that. You can have a
shirt.
beer.
Please.
Again, I will always say
be yourself.
Be yourself.
Be your best self.
Be your best self. Be respectful.
I am being my best self.
Don't make me say things I regret.
Okay.
Fair enough.
But come here and we had the governor speak tonight. We had the director of Game and Fish. We had folks from the Wyoming Department of Transportation, which are working on wildlife crossings, which is stuff that Wyoming Wildlife Federation is very excited about. They came here. We had the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust here as well. Folks are here that are willing to listen to your side of things. And when you have a legislative reception, I don't care what state you're in. I don't care what legislature you work in. These are the places where you get to have real conversations. And you don't corner a person. You go, you grab a beer, you come up, you say, thank you for coming.
It's authentic.
It's authentic.
Yeah.
Become a friend. Be real about this. These people are people that likely have some common ground with you when you talk about it. Wyoming, we love our wildlife. We are in places that have incredible landscapes to hunt in. I'm biased, but we really are a state that is enviable from most
absolutely.
Other states.
Wisconsin, you all like cheese. Build on common beliefs. Talk about cheese.
But Wyoming's full. I just want to. We need.
There's a lot of people.
Mike,
the hunting's horrible.
I heard
deer
the
are
borders
tiny.
are
Don't come.
Yeah, borders
home.
are closed. I understand. There's a wall going up on the southern border, and it's not Mexico. It's actually between Colorado and Wyoming.
Yeah.
But we also love you, and we did defeat the 90-10 bill. So.
Yes. So you can still come.
Right. But
no, take somebody hunting. Even if you're bringing them to Wyoming, bring them. Dave will take you hunting.
We'll figure it out.
Blindfolded, but they have to sign some sort of an affidavit that suggests they will not return.
But thank you for caring. I think that's the thing. It's if you care, engage. There are places to plug in all across your states, whether it's Wyoming or not. Find your legislators, reach out, whether it's a citizen legislator or not, reach out to your national delegation. These folks are here because of you, and they're listening to what you say. But make sure you say it in a way that represents you well. Because if you're not nice about it, if you're not respectful about it, if you aren't factual, and I underlined factual and many underlines,
yeah, absolutely.
Be your best. Be your best. Be your best
matter.
self.
Facts matter.
Be your best self.
That's the way that we do. And if you don't have a Camo at the Capitol, please call us because we'll get you one.
That's what I wanted to end on. I wanted to ask you. So we have advocates that listen to this all over the country. And you told us the states that have Camo on the Capitol, but I think there's an opportunity to expand this model that you've developed here to
Pennsylvania.
other states, to Pennsylvania, to Georgia, to Florida, to
D.C.
To D.C. Yeah, to Washington State, to anywhere from sea to shining sea. And so, would you be willing to
if somebody calls you.
If somebody calls you, how does somebody get a hold of you if they want to learn how you did this and they want to talk to you about doing something in their own state? How do they go about getting a hold of you?
Well, I'm going to do something really dangerous and just give you my email address, which is Jessie Johnson, JESSIJOHNSON at Wyoming Wildlife, fully spelled out, .org. And we can package this. We can make this something you can take forward. And we have this in a bundle. It's ready to ship out. It's something that we want other states to take ownership of. It doesn't have to be a Wyoming wildlife thing. What we want you to do is engage with your state legislators, because what we understand is if it starts at the state level, it trickles up. And if we're supporting that and if we're doing that, that's where we're going to see the change at the wildlife level. And please reach out. I'm happy to do it. You can find us at wyomingwildlife.org. You can find me at my email address, and you can also follow us on Instagram.
And let me put this last plug in. We all are significantly older than you are, because you're like 12, 13 now.
30. Give me something.
But the point is, we've seen, the three of us have seen how sportsmen have been advocates in the past in Wyoming, and how ineffective it's been. Circling back to the start of this conversation, which made you want to start this Camo in the Capital program for the state. We saw it firsthand. We'd been lamenting for years how we needed a program to unite sportsmen, unite that voice. And we're still in I would say we're still in the infancy. You're 3 years in, but it's growing each year.
We're just in the part where we figured out that we don't have any major bumps in the roads.
Right. So it's a process, but coming from somebody, from my perspective, and I don't know if you two share this perspective, but coming from this perspective of having watched the challenges that we've had for so many years, harnessing the sportsman's voice and harnessing and then deploying it in a way that can be effective as advocates to really elevate the voice and the impact of the sportsman's community, the sporting community in the state. This program is on track to do just that. It's the piece that's been missing for years.
Yeah, we've watched everything from a chief executive standpoint. We've had to deal with people, on this policy making process. And so we've seen it, the good bit, the bad, and the ugly, and we know how effective it is in the different ways that it's presented, and that's why we say good job.
Yeah, absolutely. Good job. So thank you, Jess, for the work you're doing. Thanks for joining us. I know this is it the second time, third time? I don't remember how time. Second time you've joined us on the podcast. So we appreciate you taking the time, especially when this is your event, and you probably should be.
It was kind of nice to just sit back and talk about politics.
Sure, I bet it is. That's why we're sort of hiding out. Like, I don't want to. Anyway, we do appreciate.
You should put that jacket on over there. Just somebody else's jacket.
Yeah. They won't miss it. Anyway,
well, thank you guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for highlighting this event.
We would ask you what your mountain is, because we normally do that with guests. But you told us last time, and so what I'm going to tell people is
I have a new one.
You can either. Okay, so we're going to do that then. I was going to say we're going to direct people back to the prior episode you were on to listen to your mountain.
Go do that.
But do that to hear what the first one was. Now tell us what your new one is. What's your mountain?
I recently went on a sheep and caribou hunt in the Northwest Territories, and I think my mountain is maybe the McKenzie's. This is a place that might be. I walked into that coming from Wyoming, having been in the thoroughfare, having been in the place that people are like, this is wild. And I went, I've never witnessed wild like this.
Nope, this is wild.
I think that the exact quote was, the American version wild in the lower 48 is quaint compared to what I'm seeing right now. And it's the last place that's like that. It's incredible. Let's protect it. And holy cow, was I lucky to experience it. But Northwest Territories. Super.
So it's an additional mountain,
It's an additional. I've got my home mountain, which will always be in my backyard in Lander, and it will always be that place that really I'll die on my sword for.
Yeah.
But the caribou, the Dall sheep, and the Northwest Territories,
I
it really
down.
is. Sheep hunting is a whole new world.
Jess's Mountain Part 2.
Part 2.
Well, thank you guys for having me on. And thank you for highlighting this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we really do appreciate it, and this has been a fabulous event, and we look forward to getting out and mingling with the people, the stragglers that are left behind here as we kind of shut down the joint. As always, thank you everybody for listening, and remember that life is about experiences, so go have one.